You're good already.
Yeah.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why
Welcome
of
into a
teaching.
brand new year of Inspiring Teachers. I'm Danny Hogger, and today my guest is Jacqueline Klinger. Jackie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we'll take our first sip here. On a brand new season of Inspiring Teachers, and yes, we are playing on the pun. And what teacher wouldn't play on the pun? And today, we have to thank Harney and Sons tea for sending us some samples. It's going to be really great. We're going to integrate the joy of tasting tea and having a great conversation and talking teaching. We think it'll bring in a lot of new interest, and we thank you so much for joining us on this brand new year. Tavis Beam can't be with us today. He is at his school in his wood shop setting up some amazing projects for his class. And before we get started, just want to thank Harney and Sons tea. Since 1983, they've been excelling in so many different flavors and luscious listings to tantalizing teas. You can go to harney.com. There's a lot you can do there. There's a blog, and it has information on how to find the tea that fits your personality. They also have a survey and a podcast. They just do a ton, and they're a very amazing company and a leader in the industry, so you can find your favorite tea at harney.com. Thank you so much. And Jackie, what tea are we having first today?
So this is our black tea, and it is a vanilla flavored tea. And the reason that I wanted to start with this is that you had mentioned that you don't typically drink coffee. Mm-hmm. And I think that in terms of tea, black tea is a really nice substitute for coffee for those teachers that are on the run that do need a little bit extra boost in caffeine and things.
So Jackie, how did you get into tea? How did it become something that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, so tea was something that I didn't necessarily always enjoy, and I was definitely into coffee. I liked kind of the effects of that and just the taste of it as well. And then I ended up going to a tea workshop in which they gave us lots of samples of tea and a large history of sort of some of the different effects of what tea can help you with in terms of digestion, in terms of different ways that it can help you either be awake, go to sleep, other things, but then also gave us tastings, which were phenomenal. I never tasted tea that I felt like just immediately, without any sugar, without anything, were just so good. And the way that you taste it was also really interesting in terms of kind of doing a little like slurping mechanism, almost like you would do with a wine or something like that, but really savoring the tea and having it as this larger part of community. And what I noticed there was that this group that was there was very full of community and connected together. And I thought I was going to take that on and kind of have that in my life as
That's
something
neat.
To build, you know, a community with my friends, family, and things like that.
That's really cool. Like, no one had ever talked to me about it, so it's neat that it was like an ambassador or some information that connected with you. And the part that sounded neat, and it's funny, and I wanted to thank you because we wouldn't be here, and this whole experience with Harney and Sons tea and even taking the show in a new direction. It's kind of what I love about meeting people in general, is like you never know what like one aspect of life that somebody might introduce to you that could be really cool.
Right.
And you'd been talking about just the calmness of sitting down and having a slower conversation. And I was even talking to Tavis about this, and it's funny because when we would do the show online, it was like a marathon, like we're sprinting, right? Welcome back to the show, and oh my gosh, we have Tamara Letter who's here from all the way from New York. And Tamara, tell us about your book. And then she's going because we set the pace that way. But I thought, like, what a better, deeper, more meaningful conversation we might have if it wasn't so rushed and if it was more about appreciating something and sharing an experience together too. So
Absolutely.
thanks for that.
Yeah.
So teaching, when did it come into your mind as like a career path? Because I remember being in college and telling my parents I might like to be a teacher, and my mom telling me don't do it. Like, go into a career path that's more lucrative, that's more financially rewarding. And so I put it out of my mind, and I did 5-10 years of broadcasting, and it was awesome.
Right.
And it made me the person I am, so I don't regret any choices. Yeah. But definitely now I feel like kind of for now this is the right place to be. When did you first think that teaching could be the place for you?
Career? I think that's really interesting that you didn't necessarily go into the teaching profession first, which obviously has come in handy in what you've been doing so far.
That's true. This wouldn't exist, right?
Yeah, and I think about that a lot, as in there are other things that I could have gone into that I would have liked, but I always thought that I wanted to do something that was going to help other people.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out necessarily what that was, but I always had that in the back of my mind, even when I was in high school, which is kind of funny because I did go to this high school that we're both teaching at myself. So having that experience and figuring out what that was that I was going to teach or do that was going to help other people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I had a very prominent English teacher who also teaches here currently, which is another whole interesting aspect, gave me books that really spoke to what it is to be a human.
That's awesome. What are maybe a book or two? Do you remember what they were?
One of my
I don't want to
favorite-
put you on the spot. It's a memory from a while ago. But
Yeah. One of my favorite books is 1984.
Oh, fantastic.
And I just, it really speaks to this idea of human nature and how are we controlled by things around us. And I think at that time that was something really important to me is like, who am I amongst the sea of people and systems that we have? Yeah. So I just wanted to take that, and I felt like English was the best way, and teaching English was the best way to enlighten people about themselves and about human culture.
That's really cool. I love that story because it's part of who you are, where you've been, and what you wanted to do going forward. It's kind of nice when those things align. Yeah. I'm glad you also picked a book that I've read. It's like, yeah, that is a good one.
Yeah, right?
And there's so many lessons too, and even in social studies, I mean, how many connections can you draw between the parallels in that book about
So many.
being aware of the world or knowing what's going on in other countries or cross-checking references about things so we don't get a myopic view of the world. And like, there's plenty that I could appreciate about that book too, which is really awesome. And so you're here in your classroom, and it's amazing. Like, we're not in a coffee shop. We're not at like an upper echelon tea house, although we're enjoying upper echelon tea, Harney.com. See what we did there? But it's like, this is the thing that super impressed me about you before I even talked to you. Is like, somebody that cares enough to put in this kind of time and investment is going to endear themselves to their students. Nobody's going to spend this investment time with this here and be a horrible teacher. It's just not going to happen. And you're my neighbor, so I was like, this is cool. I have a very cool neighbor, and I don't even know you. And I just got to think that it's got to be so rewarding for your students to come into a place that looks warm, inviting, welcoming, and what a great place to learn. Yeah. Tell me why you decided to do and set up your room this way.
Oh gosh. Well, I think having wanting to be a teacher for so long, it's always been something in the back of my mind. I kind of dabble in art as well as, design type things. And so this was always something that I kind of dreamed of, like, what is my classroom going to look like? But going further into like studying, teaching, and in my credential program and things like that, thinking about how important the classroom culture is, which, as you just said, you walked into my room and thought a certain, right? And that changes the way you immediately are perceived by your students. But it really wasn't so I would be perceived a certain way. It's so that they would feel comfortable enough to grab a book, to sit down and want to read it. Because in your real life, when you're using English...
Wait, you're not connected to a desk at home with a chair and an iron metal surface?
Trying to grab for your pencil on the side. Yeah, thank God for that. No, so this idea of being able to read in an area or discover reading for a lot of these students in a place that is authentic to where you might be doing it in your actual everyday life.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I love coffee shops, which kind of goes along with my tea, right? Being able to kind of sip a nice tea, have a coffee in a good atmosphere, sets you in the mood for reading and the mood for thinking about more complex things.
Yeah, I feel like we're in a novel and this is the setting, right? And how important the setting can be to what happens inside the story. Yeah. It's pretty meta. I'm pretty proud of myself right there. That would be a moment where I was like, I call that out. I'm like, oh, that was thoughtful, right?
Yes.
That mindfulness, let's go there next because it has to be the right path if I just came up with it, is so important, I feel like, to teaching. And we were talking off air a little bit about what it's like to find yourself as a teacher and what is the right thing, as if there was a right thing, because it's who you are. So You mentioned how you dabble in art and you do other things too.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know I do to endear myself to students is like radio, guitar.
Right.
Now here's all the things that I've done that I would have thought if I was in high school were cool, right? And now look, I'm becoming the person I was trying to be. I feel like sharing those things, instilling those things in classroom builds connection with students and also maybe gives them something to aspire to.
Hey, if that is the setting, then those are the characters that you're building.
Look what we're doing
Look
here.
at that.
Building a whole story.
And you really are. You're building a small culture in your classroom. And they need to be able to invest in that environment, invest in you and who you are. And otherwise, they're not going to invest themselves. Why would they?
For
Right?
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. What do you think makes you unique as a teacher? Like, what do you think are some of the things that you are trying to strive to be this year? That's a big question.
Gosh, that is
And
a big question.
it'll change.
Yeah. I think that is
It's huge.
It's a huge question because there's so many things, you want to do. And as especially being a new teacher, there's so many different things I want to hit. I want them to improve. Like, I really want them to grow, and I want them to walk away from the class and say, hey, this class changed me. And maybe it's not vastly different than who I was before, but it made me, want to try harder because I realized that I could improve. But I also just want to create like this safe environment in which students then take that out of the classroom and they're able to talk about, settings and deeper life meanings, whether it's at a coffee shop or they're talking about a movie that they just watched. And they're able to apply, like you said, histories and things, instead of just taking things at such face value that I think like our technological age is really not enabling us to go deeper.
Yeah.
It's just like, here's the information and here it is. Instead, going out into life and pondering some things. And maybe if they ponder some things in this class, they'll do it in their real life.
It's great. I love it. Since you mentioned going deeper, how about we go to our second tee and then talk about that a little bit?
I would love that. I'm really excited because we have not tried this one
Right.
yet.
We're going to take the first
Okay,
sip with
yeah.
you, the audience.
It's
And again,
wonderful.
Harney.com if you're looking to purchase the teas. We'll have them in the description along with links. So what are we having?
It's really good.
It's very nice.
I have not had a bad
No.
taste from Harney and Sons
That's
yet.
amazing. And it's my
Yeah.
fourth, and I have to be forthcoming and say that I don't have a big history with tea. And so I'm kind of being introduced by you to these things,
Right.
and I've enjoyed everything.
Yeah,
So
no,
what
and
is-
I do, and all of their teas have been incredibly rich in their flavor.
And you
feel
like the loose teas, right? Don't you feel like you
Yeah.
get maybe more flavor or more flavor control from being able
so
to
we were
have a
talking
loose
about
leaf?
that a little bit earlier. I only typically drink loose leaf just because learning a little bit about tea after getting really invested in it. What the process looks like is the loose leaf is the larger tea leaves on the tea. This is white tea, so it is our royal wedding tea. And so there is a blend of other different herbs and things in there and floral aspects. But the tea itself, which is going to be the white tea, the leaves are whole. And so you can steep them multiple times. Oftentimes that steep becomes, or the second steep becomes the best steep. A little more robust and kind of deeper in the flavor. And I found that the tea bags are sort of the teas that are usually kind of the droppings of the plant, and they don't last as long. You can't necessarily, although stronger sometimes, doesn't have the same quality of flavor and long lasting.
Since the second steep is often the richest, I'll carry on to like maybe a teaching parallel. Because you said something that was important to me.
yeah.
And you kind of pre-answered the question of like, what do you want kids to have learned from you? And you mentioned some of those things. One of the things I feel like I hope they'll carry from me is looking at the news every day and multiple perspectives and then considering where they might think about that rather than reading a headline, moving on and preforming your opinion or having an echo chamber where you only look at news sources that agree with you.
Yeah.
Looking at several, analyzing, digesting, and then having a thought about what that might be. And sometimes withholding a thought until more events happen and you can see a pattern or someone in your life, because I think the exposure thing is pretty crucial.
Yeah.
When I was at Dominican, Melba Beals was my radio 101 teacher. I might have mentioned that to you. And she was like a civil rights icon that integrated Central High in 1957, which is amazing. And one of the things she said is that you really should be aware of what's going on in the world, because it may be a conversation that you have on an elevator that makes 2 minutes more convenient, or it might get you a job one day, or it might help you consider a job opportunity and maybe serve the world in a way that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
And up till that point, I would admit, like in high school, I don't think I knew or cared, and we didn't have it bombarded into our senses because we weren't always online. So I think that that's one thing that I would want students to have, is the ability, and you said like a safe place to talk. Yeah. I told them at the beginning of the year, there's nothing we can't talk about. There's lots of controversies in the world and things that get people so heated that they could fight. And I feel like if you're getting to the boiling point, maybe you've lost the logic or the reasoning behind your thoughts, and you can't come back to a place where we could discuss what someone else's opinion might be. So I always tell them, I don't need you to think like me, but I'd like you to be able to think critically and have good reasons. So what you said too is like the skills you get in reading a book, analyzing a character, a setting, looking at a plot and different perspectives of characters. That's life, man. I mean, we could go through thinking our own way and be closed off and not grow.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's funny because you and I have the subjects that are often core paired together.
Yeah.
But there's skills that transfer.
Yeah. No, I like what you're saying about sort of that discussion that needs to take place rather than I believe this and that's it.
And that's it. And if you don't believe, then you're something else. You're a group. You're other. You're different. You're not right.
And that is not the process of forming opinions, right?
It's not
to
math
form
class.
an opinion, you actually have to take into consider other people's opinion. That's what makes your opinion stronger. And I know we're looking a lot with counterclaims and things like that. And we had a fishbowl type discussion, and this is not a debate. This is wow, that's an interesting idea. How is that going to help me formulate my idea now?
It's nice. It's really true. There's so many different ways to think about things, and if we're thinking there's a right and a wrong, we're missing a lot of the picture in so many different ways. That was a nice little conversational drive that we just did there. I enjoyed the view. I don't know what I didn't mean to use the word drive, but I tied it up with
It was beautiful. Yeah.
Those little mindfulness, which was the avenue we were first on, and now I did avenue. Dude, that's good. See, in a class, I would call that out.
That is literature right there. That is some figurative language.
Don't inflate my ego. I don't want an airbag deployment. See? And there's like a fourth pun. But the mindfulness, I love that. That's something I want to get better at this year. And last year, I think I was so goal-oriented of like, we have 90 minutes. This is the beginning of class, the middle, and the end. And now I think like, stop a sec. You might find something if you listen to what students are saying while they're doing it that enrich or come up with another level. Yeah. So we were doing a global trade, and they moved products around the room. They had little cards. And then I thought, it would be a fun extension if like, at the end, they have to create a menu and then compete to see who has the most pressing modern day food that would attract people, and who has the best commodity. And part of it is salesmanship. And I'm like, this wasn't the lesson, but it is now. Because now
But they also need that skill in their life. So thinking about like those larger skills that they're going to need, that's what's always on my mind. I don't know if that's something.
It should be.
Yeah. Like when they leave this, because they're not going to remember pointing out the claim or what random fact they might, right? They might remember a certain date or what happened at this time. But really the skills that is going to get them like, oh, now I know how to do this. I know how to sell a product because I did this in my class.
Could be useful. They do remember experiences. I have a TA, and while they were doing that, and this is the listening mindful part, because you could be such a driven teacher, like, I need to like walk around now, I need to check every table, I need to check every person. And I've been there. And I've been the one too in past years who's like, I need to control, I got to hold. They're in my palm all the time.
Right.
And I was talking to my TA, she's like, you know what I like that we did last year? I'm like, okay, I'm open for this. What? I could have been like, hold on, right? And sometimes you don't get back to it, because I'm like, I can't chat with my TA, I have a class. But she said, last year when you talked Revolution, you pretended you found a love letter on the ground. I'm like, I did? What about? It was a breakup letter, and you made it seem like you were reading a student's breakup letter in front of the room. Like, you're kidding. I didn't even remember. She goes, but what it was it was all an allegory to how the United States was breaking up with England and declaring independence.
That's
and it was written from
amazing.
King George. I'm like, I honestly don't remember. She's like, you know what would be great? Could you still do it? I'm like, I need to do it tomorrow because we'll be done with that unit. She goes, I'll handwrite it for you.
Oh,
She's like, because that's my favorite
great.
thing you did. It was hilarious. And they remember experiences, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes going that extra mile or thinking of new ways to do that. And then if you do that every year, I imagine in our career, when we look back at this, we'll be like, oh, I can't believe I didn't have this talent or skill or tool that I now use all the time. So I think these are the kinds of things that we build. And this is why we do the show, too, because people have shared ideas on the show that have enlightened other people.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that you would take the time to join us today.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I just have another, the last question is kind of the final thing, is like, why, what gets you excited about coming into the classroom, and why do you get up every morning and come here to do it? I know it hasn't been that long, and the why changes for a lot of people, but what is your why of teaching that might fire up a teacher out there who's having a little trouble with burnout or wondering, needs that focus? You know, what is it about teaching that you find inspiring?
I just feel like the connection to other people, and I feel like learning alongside the students and from the students. It's kind of the same thing in terms of meeting you and talking about your podcast. I don't think I would have ever been doing this, right? You would never be here drinking tea with me.
It's true.
And it's those little things you learn from people and come together and make this sort of small community out of something that, you know, everyone's forced into, right? They're technically forced to be here, but then being able to walk away and really have everyone kind of grow from being just in contact with one another and learning about who they are and growing like alongside each other.
It's beautiful. Very nicely said. So I'll say maybe the homework from that for the week is, what's a way in which your classroom can give students an opportunity to do that too? Because I always think about the friendships that are made in your class that didn't exist before that might lead them on an amazing adventure together in their lives too. So for Jacqui Klinger, I'm Danny Hogger, and for Tavis Beam as well, we want to thank Harney and Sons Tea. Go to harney.com for them, and thank ampeduplearning.com for supporting our show continuously. I'm Danny Hogger, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Find us on Twitter @ShowTeachers and on Instagram @InspiringTeacherShow. We hope you'll join us again.
Yes.
All right, until next time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching, and class dismissed.
I think we should.
Very nice.